Hi, this is Sean D'Souza from Psychotactics.com, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation Podcast. This podcast isn't some magic trick about working less. Instead, it's about how to really enjoy your work and enjoy your vacation time. This is the 3-Month Vacation. I'm Sean D'Souza. Back in the year 2003, I wrote an article about headlines. I always found that it was very easy for me to write headlines and people struggled with it. So I had to devise a way that would make it really simple. And so I wrote an article where you just had to take 3 steps to write a great headline. You could test the headline and you could find out in minutes that it worked for you, and it also got the attention of your customers. What I wasn't prepared for was how many times that article got read. So as we were looking at the statistics of the Psychotactics site, we saw that the article got picked up over and over and over again. And then we decided, hey, let's make this a report. What surprised me about that was that when I took that same article, which was just about 800 words, and I put it into a PDF and put some graphics and an introduction and some cartoons, it became close to a 10-page book. That is the headline report. It's a report that conservatively has attracted tens of thousands of customers. And customers come up to us at workshops and they tell us, I read the report and then I got deeper into the website. And so this is the interesting part. The report was nothing more than an article. So can we do the same? Can we all do the same? Can we just write an 800-word article, put it in a report, and make it powerful? Not quite. You have to understand why the report works, and we're going to break up that headline report here today on this podcast, and you'll see for yourself there are 3 elements that make it work. Let's explore those 3 elements, shall we? So, what makes the report so powerful? The key factor is not the elements, but the overall concept. And the overall concept is one of empowerment. We are so hung up on the concept of information that we forget what we really have to do as teachers. As teachers, we have to empower. We know we've done our job correctly when the client is able to do exactly what we're doing and possibly even better. And frankly, when I was writing the headline report, I wasn't thinking of this. I wasn't thinking of empowerment. I wasn't thinking of the elements. But when you deconstruct the report, you can see there are 3 very specific elements that make it that empowerment tool. The first of the elements is tiny increments. The second is the length. And the third are the examples in the report. Let's explore each one systematically. Let's start off with the first one, which is the tiny increments. So what are tiny increments? About a month ago, I got myself some recording hardware, and it has all these buttons and stuff on it, and it's very hard to figure out which button to press and when to press it. And of course, you don't want to look at the manual because that's really badly written. So maybe you go online like I did and you go to YouTube. And there are lots of tutorials on how to use it, but there's all this unboxing and then something else and something else. And 35 minutes later, you have no clue what you're supposed to do. But then I found a video that was only 3 minutes long. And the video only covered turning on the device. Now, it was 3 minutes long. How much can you learn about turning on a device? It's a little switch. But it was so cool. I could actually do it. It was a tiny increment. You don't have to put in a ton of stuff for people to be impressed. You don't have to put in a lot of information for clients to be impressed. You have to empower. At the end of that video, what could I do? Yes, I could turn it on. I could turn on the device. So what do I do next? I go to the next video. And in the next video, they cover a little bit again. And this is the concept of tiny increments. When we're teaching, we don't understand that the client doesn't get what we're saying. So let's say you've come to one of the psychotactics workshops and we're doing an experiment. We're saying we're going to take steps now. And I say, okay, let's take a step. And then you watch the people in the room. What do? Almost everyone will take a step forward, but someone will take a step to the left, or someone will take a step to the right, or someone will take a step back. So now we have all these permutations where people are going off tangent, and if they just take one step, they just make one mistake, you can pull them back and then say, okay, what I meant was take a step to the left. And now the whole group can go one step back, one step to the left, and now we're on target. When you have something that has a very tiny increment, the customer can only make a very small mistake. You can spot the mistake and pull them back, or you can show them that mistake in your report and pull them back. But when you have this wealth of information, all these buttons to press and all these things to do all at once, suddenly the customer is lost. And when they're lost, they're intimidated. And intimidation doesn't create a safe zone. And when you don't create a safe zone, then, of course, you don't get empowerment. So the first factor you have to look at when you look at the headline report is this concept of tiny increments. You only have to take a very tiny step to get from point A to point B. When you've taken that step, you can go from point B to point C. And this is what struck me when I stepped into an Apple store many years ago. It's one of the reasons why I bought an Apple, even though I'd been using a PC for ages. When I got into the store, I just had to do one thing. And that one thing led to the next thing. And that next thing led to the next thing. And this is very cool. You see it on the iPad where you just have to press a little button. And that one thing leads to the next thing. So this is the concept of tiny increments. And you see this in the headline report. And it's what you've got to do in your report. Just one little step. Now this takes us to the second one, which is the concept of length. And length really helps in empowerment. So how does it help? Every time I speak to someone about this podcast, I will say, well, the podcast is only about 15 to 20 minutes long. But let's say I didn't say 15 to 20 minutes long. Let's say I said it's only 2 to 3 hours long. Can you tell the difference? Of course there's a difference. There's a very clear difference. When you say 15 to 20 minutes long, people think, well, I could go for a little walk and I could listen to the podcast. And this principle of length is very critical, especially when a customer doesn't know you that well. And you have to kind of get your message across without going crazy on them. This concept of length really helped me when I was trying to work out that audio hardware. I just had to deal with 3 minutes, and then after that, the next 3 minutes, and then the next 3 minutes. But every one of those 3-minute capsules, they empowered me. They moved me forward. They didn't confuse me. They didn't intimidate me. And the headline report does this in a really fascinating way. It moves you forward, and within 10 pages, you're done. Now the question arises, is that it? Is that all you can write about headlines? No, of course not. You could write 300 pages, you could write 500 pages. There is a wealth of information in the world of headlines. But do you have to put it in the report? The core of empowerment is simply one of length. When there is not too much of it, someone is able to consume it. And once they're able to consume it, you have empowered them. And you know that because you can get them to teach you what you've just taught them. And they will do that spectacularly well. So we take the first concept, which is tiny increments, and we take the second concept, which is length, and that leaves us with just the third one. So what is the third one? The third one is simply one of examples and case studies. When you listen to this podcast, you got a whole bunch of examples about the recording device and how I had to fiddle with it. You also got the example of how the iPad worked, and of course my visit to the Apple Store for the first time in 2008. And those were examples. So why were those examples there? They weren't just random stuff. For one thing, the example lowers that intimidation factor. Immediately you're taken on a little side journey, a little detour, and that helps you to focus on the idea. But it also helps you understand the concept in greater detail. So when you look at the headline report, you'll find that there is an example of how the headline is being built stage by stage. If all you had was a concept on how to write a headline, it might not be that easy to understand. If you didn't have the example, it would be so much more dreary and so much harder to achieve the very same result. And as a teacher, that's your goal. Your goal is to empower. Examples empower. Case studies empower. Stories empower. So go down that path and put it in your report. And that's what makes it more powerful. Whether you're reading The Brain Audit or Pricing or any book, you will find that we use this concept. Whether you come to a workshop and you listen to any of our presentations, you will find there are dozens of examples. And it's a factor of information and example and information and example and this nice thread going through the whole system. And that's what causes empowerment. That's what creates that power of empowerment. That's what clients read and go, wow, I should delve more into this stuff. The biggest problem we have is that we know too much. And we try to put all that too much into our reports, into our books, into our presentations. And it comes across as, wow, this is amazing stuff. But does it empower? It's easy to give information. A lot of people are giving a lot of information. It's all stuff coming at you, left, right, and center. And you don't know where to go. And your client doesn't know where to go either. But have this little guiding light of empowerment and everything changes. We started out with a report. We started out with just a little article. But that article had steps and it went from one step to another to another. And when it got into the report stage, it was clearer because of the graphics, because of the layout. And that's how you should go about writing your report. Think about empowerment and think about the three things that we've covered today. The first thing that we covered today was tiny increments. Remember that even if you say take one step, people can take steps in all directions. So you take very tiny steps. The second thing is one of length. A 3-hour podcast, a 300-page report. Very, very interesting, but no one's going to read it. So you want to keep it simple. You want to keep it within 10 or 12 pages. And finally, you want to reduce that intimidation factor. It's very hard to understand a new concept. Having examples, having stories, having case studies, this really makes it easier for me to figure out what you're saying. Which brings us to the end of this podcast. So what is the one thing that you can do? I think the one thing that you should do is to just boil it down to 3 things. You've seen how this podcast just covers 3 elements. If I wanted to write a book on how to create a great report, I could write 200 pages. But this podcast, it's a report. It's just got 3 points, 3 simple points, and you've been empowered. And I think you should do the same. Just jot down 3 points. I know there are 700 points on the topic. Just focus on 3, and you'll have a report that someone actually consumes. Now, isn't that a novel idea? So get that report going as soon as you can, because the sooner you get people to download it, the more likely they are to subscribe to your newsletter. There are lots of articles out there, but a report has this kind of pizzazz to it that articles might not have. People are more eager to sign up for a report. While you're writing a report, if you want to embellish it with stories, because stories are very effective, then go to psychotactics.com/story. There is a series there, a very economical series on storytelling. It shows you how stories move forward, how they have counterflow, which means that they start moving quite the other way. You learn how to use suspense instead of mystery, all the elements that make for a great story. The brain audit, for instance, has, 20 stories and 25 pages. And the reason why it is so powerful, why you can't stop reading the brain audit, is because of storytelling. Now, when you're reading it, it reads just like a marketing book, but there are stories there. And what you need to do is go to psychotactics.com/story and get yourself the book. So many of us are focused on how do we get clients, how do we do this, how do we do that, but at the end of the day, the fundamentals of communication really matter. And storytelling is one of them. Understanding why customers buy and why they don't is another, and for that you have to read the brain audit. So if you do nothing else, look at the brain audit. You can get a free excerpt at psychotactics.com/xbrain. So get yourself that free excerpt and start examining how it works almost like a report and how it has all these stories embedded in it. Storytelling is really cool. You should learn how to do it, because once you slip into a story, people just listen. And this is why you're listening to the podcast. There are so many stories. When we started out, the podcast had maybe 1-2 stories. Now the average podcast has about 6-7 stories maybe. And where do we get all these stories from? How do we create these stories? That's what we're doing the storytelling workshop about. But even if you get the book, you will get a very good foundation on storytelling. So that's psychotactics.com/story. There's just one rerun to go, and that's the next one. And after that, we get back to new episodes on the 3-month vacation. So look out for this last one and then the new episodes. That's me, Sean D'Souza, saying bye for now. Bye-bye. Still listening? I wasn't always good at empowerment. In fact, it was terrible. The first time we did an event in Auckland, about the year 2003, I had a workshop and I had the slide after slide after slide, and it was terrible. I mean, at the end of the 2 days, everyone felt like they had a lot of information. Everyone felt very excited, but everyone was tired. And to me, that's not empowerment. When someone is empowered, they're not tired. They're ready to take on the world. They're ready to implement. That's probably the key factor that I look at when I do workshops now. At the end of 2 days or 3 days, and sometimes we do workshops of 7 days, are they exhausted? Are they all red in the face? Are they tired? That's my benchmark, the benchmark of empowerment. And I didn't always do that well. In fact, at the first workshop, I was so exhausted that I had to rest for 3 or 4 days after the workshop. And over the years, I found that I'm less tired after the workshops, and so are the clients. And that means we're both in a stage of empowering and being empowered. That's your little snippet from the Psychotactics archive. Bye for now.